Here's a guy who thinks he can prove that God exists.
I don't believe God exists. This is, I'm sorry. I don't believe God exists. That was another one. Prove to me that God exists. Show me evidence of God's existence. Don't be like, be like, sure, I'll definitely do that. God's going to throw them off. Totally do it. Who cares? Because you do have proof, and I'm about to give it to you. All right? It's called the preconditions of intelligibility. You use it. They use it all the time, every day of their life. Every time they walk out their door or get up in the morning, when they breathe, they're using these. Okay? I'm about to explain it. The first precondition is absolute morality.
How would absolute morality be a precondition for intelligibility? A precondition for intelligibility should be something that a concept has to have in order to be intelligible, or something like that. Not only do I not see absolute morality as a precondition for intelligibility, I don't even see it as intelligible.
Okay? Absolute morality exists. We know absolute morality exists because if you give somebody a really hardcore, crazy scenario like torturing babies for fun, when is it okay to torture babies for fun? Never, unless you're a psycho, right?
It's never tolerable to my conscience, but the fact that something is never tolerable to my conscience doesn't make it absolutely objectively immoral. The very fact that there are psychos who don't feel the same way shows it's not absolutely intolerable in the broadest sense, even if it is absolutely intolerable to my conscience and yours. Even if there is a God, and it's intolerable to God's conscience, that wouldn't make it absolute either. God, if he exists, is allegedly a conscious mind. That's what a subject is, and by definition, anything contingent upon a subject is subjective rather than absolute.
And we can both agree that you have to be a psycho to say it's okay to torture babies for fun under any circumstance. Absolute truth exists. Oh, there are no absolute truths. Well, that person just made an absolute truth statement.
Not necessarily. Any statement I ever make is merely a statement of belief rather than a claim of absolute truth, and that includes this statement that I'm making right now. Even if there is such a thing as absolute truth, there's nothing about which I am absolutely infallible, therefore I can't honestly make any claims of absolute truth.
So, well, that's an absolute truth statement you just made. So anything, we do know truth. We have truth. We know that something can be true, laws of logic. A car can't be that's the third one. A car can't be inside the garage and outside the garage at the same time.
That's not a great example because a car can be partly inside and partly outside a garage at the same time. A better example would be that a car cannot both exist and not exist at the same time and in the same respect. Even this, I cannot claim to be an absolute truth. It might be an absolute truth, but I can't be absolutely certain of that. I believe it because I don't understand what it would mean for it to not be true, but again, I'm fallible, so I can't entirely guarantee that I'm correct in believing such a statement. The fact that the laws of logic have changed over time is further evidence that we can even be wrong about something as seemingly incontrovertible as the laws of logic. Arguments considered valid under Aristotelian logic would not be valid under Boolean logic, for example.
We know that to be true. It's a laws of logic. We have that common ground. We know it exists. We know that happens. We have those preconditions.
For now, maybe we'll always have them, but maybe we'll realize that the law of non-contradiction doesn't always apply or doesn't always make sense. The reason I believe it now is because I can't understand what it would mean for it to be false. But the fact that I can't understand how something could be false doesn't mean that it is not false.
Uniformity in nature. I'm giving you 4. There's technically just 3. It will be absolute morality, laws of logic, and uniformity in nature. But I like to add absolute truth because that kind of coincides with absolute morality. So uniformity in nature is not to be confused with uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism is rates and conditions have never changed in the whole world, and we know you don't have to mention this stuff, but we know that is not true because of the global flood and things might have been different then.
We only believe that things are uniform if they consistently look uniform. Anything we infer to be uniform could possibly be mutable. Sometimes things that look uniform can turn out not to be. That's why the law of conservation of parity had to be revised. It's why Einstein said that time and space are not uniform, despite just about everybody believing that they were. You can question whether the things that we think are uniform, like the speed of light in a vacuum, really are, but there's no reason to believe that they're not unless you can show evidence of a lack of uniformity. Otherwise, we believe that things are uniform for as long as they consistently look uniform, because that's the simplest and thus most probably correct inference. There's no need to infer that things change if we never see evidence that they change. Creationists believe that things are uniform until uniformity is inconvenient for their worldview. This dude probably believes that erosion rates or some such thing were different in the past. Not because there's evidence of this, but rather because he needs that to be the case in order for his worldview to make sense.
We have fossil records of huge cockroaches the size of a surfboard. It's crazy.
Yeah, arthropods are much smaller now than they were in the past because most arthropods don't breathe. Instead, they have a kind of ventilation system in their bodies that delivers oxygen to their organs. There was a time, however, when there was much more oxygen in the atmosphere than there is now, which allowed bugs to get a lot bigger than is currently possible. However, the reason we know this is because we have lots of geological evidence in addition to fossil evidence that corroborates this. That's why the oxygen content of the atmosphere is not considered a constant. Uniformitarianism doesn't imply that it is a constant. It only says that things are constant if we never see evidence that they change.
We got some crazy stuff out there we found. All right. But either way, racing conditions have not been exactly the same. So we're not promoting uniformitarianism. We're promoting uniformity in nature. When you go outside, you can trust tomorrow that the gravity is going to work in your favor and not send you off flying into space. We have that control. We know that there's control and uniformity in nature.
No, we don't know that. We inductively infer that to be the case. All of the parameters that we consider to be constants, we infer to be constants from the fact that we never see them change. That doesn't prove that they never will change. If we were infallible with respect to determining laws and constants, we never would have needed to revise any of them. For example, the rate at which time passes and distances in space were considered constant until Einstein and Eddington demonstrated that they were not.
So those are the three preconditions of intelligibility that prove God's existence, that prove that God exists.
This is one of those arguments that starts with premises that aren't true and draws a conclusion that doesn't follow even if they were true. Even if we could be sure that all of these things really are absolute, the idea that the existence of absolutes requires a God is predicated on the baseless assumption that the default state of reality is chaos and that order, uniformity, and absolutes can only exist if they are deliberately imposed by a conscious mind. There is no reason to believe that this is the case.
Okay? That is a more detailed answer to prove God exists. Obviously you've got the minor ones where you can just say, hey, look at that building. How do you know there's proof that there's a builder? The building is the proof that there's a builder. What if you find a painting in the middle of the woods? I think we've talked about this before, but that would be kind of a minor one.
This argument is based on the assumption that the mere existence of something proves that it had a creator. This is a principle that apologists don't actually even believe. They believe that paintings need painters, buildings need builders, and even that universes need universers, but when it comes to God, all of a sudden a creator is not needed. God is apparently the one and only thing that can just exist on his own. It's a special pleading argument.
But if they're intelligent and they're going to be asking you these questions or seem to be like having like a book smart kind of intelligence, like a college student, they're going to ask you those questions and they're going to expect the preconditions of intelligibility answer, which now I gave you, so it's super easy. Now, when they say, well, those could exist without God, ask them to show you an example of how that can exist without God.
Look at it this way. Absolutes, constants, uniformities, etc. are when something does not change. If we measure the speed of light today, we will very likely get the same result as if we measured it yesterday. Now, if we get a different result and discover that the speed of light has changed, it would make sense to ask what caused it to change. Maybe God changed it. But if it doesn't change, it doesn't make sense to ask for a cause because nothing happened. There's nothing to explain. I can understand thinking it's a miracle if the speed of light changed, but why would divine intervention be necessary if it doesn't change?
Especially use absolute morality, because that's the easiest one. That's the strongest one. Because how can you justify? I know it's wrong, but how can you justify within your worldview, without God, that torturing your baby is completely wrong no matter what circumstance?
Well, your justification is it's always wrong because God says it's always wrong. How does that even follow? What objective, non-circular reason is there to obey what God says? I don't see the point of justifying what my conscience tells me because it's going to force me to abstain from doing things that are intolerable to it, whether that abstinence is justified or not. Justification is therefore entirely inconsequential with regard to my behavior. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.